a title referring to the key piece of evidence in prosecution proceedings. The 2007 British crime thriller Exhibit A puts you into a theoretical courtroom to witness camcorder footage collected by Yorkshire police at a murder scene. It immediately evokes the dreadful inevitability of what is to come, as the story slowly draws us into the raw and unfiltered lives of the King family, as the husband and father Andy begins to exhibit strange and unstable behaviour as he experiences increasing personal and financial turmoil that gruelingly lead us to a seemingly once happy family succumbing to annihilation. Ultimately, you cannot talk about Exhibit A without accepting the reality it's based on. Family annihilators are a ghoulishly unique breed of killer, which Dr. Marilyn Gregory of Sheffield University described to BBC as leading to various trains of thought. Mainly, the perpetrator may see the death of the family, particularly the children, as a last desperate act to regain power and control of their property, so to speak, whilst delusionally justifying it as altruistic. Sometimes it's theorized as a means of revenge or punishment towards a parent during an existing dispute, yet regardless of motive, we know it as a purely selfish and evil act of impulse or premeditation that is used to cement the perpetrator's diabolical notoriety. This generalized summary serves to put into context what Exhibit A aims to present through its profoundly uncomfortable and minimalistic kitchen sink voyeurism, where the family's intimate and at times shameful privacy is exposed to us for the purposes of pointing a finger at what we know. Beyond the inevitable, Exhibit A is a relatable and complex domestic drama that explores how the individual tensions and conflicts of Andy, his wife Sheila, their daughter Judith, and older son Joe escalate towards the tragic tipping point. This is the found footage subgenre in its most raw and unfiltered form. It chooses to emphasize the banal and mundane over reductive scares and cinematics to leave us with a tangible aftertaste of sadness, anger, and despair as we witness the unseen suffering that happens behind closed doors. It is a kitchen sink character study with subtle and meticulous attention to detail. So if you're ready for it, as always, brace yourself. Now, just before we go further, this video is made possible thanks to our sponsor Vessi. Where I live, spring is finally here, which means brighter, longer days and better, cozier temperatures, making March the month of movement. However, the weather can still change unexpectedly, so that's why I'm wearing Vessi's Weekend Neo, a 100% waterproof slip-on and go lightweight shoe that serves as your perfect all-in-one companion for every occasion to make your daily life hassle-free. Look, I don't like thinking about the logistics of travel or how to appropriately dress for certain conditions. I'm a simple get up and go guy when it comes to walking cheddar, running errands, traveling for work, or going on spontaneous adventures, so I value intuitively practical breathable footwear that smartly adapts with my fashion sense, and I truly never go wrong with Vessi. Weekend Neo is an evolution of Vessi's forever dependable weekend classic with their vegan-friendly premium knit material providing a softly tailored fit to prevent friction for all-day use, and TPU overlay adding extra protection, durability, and easy clean functionality. Oh, and did I forget to add, they will keep your feet bone dry in rain, sleet, snow, and sweat-inducing temperatures. If your March plans involve moving, commuting, traveling, exploring, and you need a shoe to stay dry, stay comfortable, and simplify your packing, you can get 15% off your Weekend Neo at vessi.com/ryanhollinger or by scanning the QR code on screen, in addition to free shipping, a 1-year warranty, and 30-day hassle-free returns. Exhibit A is shot on a mid-2000s consumer-grade camcorder to give it the necessary homemade quality of a potato, with its interlacing and grainy lapsing exposure that solidify the realistic basis of its events. In fact, what's harrowingly nostalgic about it in retrospect is that I remember my first camcorder from 2005 being exactly like this, and to this day, my dad still teases me about the price. Well dad, look at me now, 20 years later and that £500 camera turned into this monstrosity of a career. I know you watch these videos, so you best be proud of that investment. Anyway, the context of the camera itself is actually significant to the themes of the story, as it establishes Andy gives Ruth the camera to document the family's happy lives, only to constantly dictate and control what she films, leading to increasing resentment as Judith pushes back against her father's bossy demeanor as he attempts to manufacture spontaneous moments, much to the family's evident discomfort. It frequently calls into question his ultimate motive with the footage, as my reading of the material based on what we eventually learn about him suggests he likes bragging to the world about having this idealistic perfect family, despite the strain he's constantly discovered to put them through. Now, the term narcissist is often misused on the internet, but that's basically what Andy shows himself to be. The first half presents a very insidious form of abuse where Andy is never overtly aggressive, but there's a stern, quiet feeling of menace in his presence, like an antagonizing stare or hidden kick under the table, where you don't ever see him get violent, but actor Bradley Cole does a subtly brilliant job at showing how Andy seemingly controls through fear. Granted, much of my reading again comes in retrospect, but since the film leads with the fact that murder has taken place, you're instinctively conditioned to look for red flags to confirm that preconceived perception. The thing is, when we remove the framing device of the story, on the surface, Andy is just every obnoxious boomer father who thinks he's funny, cool, clever, and has everything under control. However, it's that groundedness that makes him so terrifying. He is such a distinctly and palatably ordinary dad who is just naturally overbearing, mistakes his bullying for playfulness and banter, and constantly embarrasses himself through continuous efforts at approval. The point is that much of this historically aligns with the disarming nature of most family annihilators, who are often people you would never expect to commit such wickedness. It is an example of the banality of evil. In my obviously non-expert JCS opinion, Andy's battling with deep insecurities to validate his abilities as a husband and father, provider and protector, only to constantly demonstrate tremendous financial irresponsibility through impulsive habits that ultimately detriment the family, such as buying timeshares, lottery tickets, and other things they simply cannot afford. If you listen carefully, you'll pick up on many background details that allude to Andy's poor decision-making prior to the events we witness, while arguments with Sheila happen out of sight of the children, reinforcing the long-standing tension that lives and breathes beyond the boundaries of the camera. With the surname King, of course Andy leans into showing immense pride and vanity, even calling the house Camelot to echo the phrase that every man's home is his castle, while showing this classical masculine stoicism where he hides his emotions to appear as the confident breadwinner of the family, when in fact it's Sheila doing much of the heavy lifting. He's effectively trying to buy their love. His acts of kindness towards the family are evidently hollow and insincere because he wants to document himself to falsely appear as a perfect hero, husband and father, when he's only ever thinking about himself and how others might perceive him. All of this is sadly noted by Judith early in the story, where she astutely but helplessly tries to comfort her father and shows awareness for his fake illusion of happiness. She's heartbroken and fearful for his mental state as he hides the fact he failed to get his long disputed work promotion, but as they say, the camera never lies. You can vividly see the bitterness and disappointment written on his face. Andy's ultimate goal from the start is to buy an expensive house near the family's beloved beach that's filled with cherished memories, but with no promotion and little income, he cracks under the pressure, which becomes symbolized when he contracts a pool to be built in the back garden to increase the value of the house that Sheila is struggling to sell. The way I see it, the construction of the pool is a very stark metaphor for not just digging the family's grave, but it represents Andy's state of mind and reminds us of his selfishness and irresponsibility as he ends up having to haphazardly complete the pool himself as his family grows distant from him and understandably resentful of his behaviour. In fact, further symbolism is conveyed through Andy's footage of the family pretending to enjoy their beloved beach in cold, overcast weather that's intercut throughout to reinforce the unhappiness that's permeating as a result of his actions. Where events significantly escalate is when we learn that Andy has been ignoring work calls after his friend and colleague Ray arrives in new work attire to check in on him, implying Ray got the promotion over Andy, which is then later confirmed when one night Andy returns home covered in blood, claiming he and Ray were attacked, eventually causing Ray to confront Andy several days later during a pool party and calling Andy out for disfiguring him in order to claim the promotion for himself. After Andy attempts to de-escalate events, the scene ends by idiosyncratically consolidating his mental anguish when Judith tells her father things will be okay and not be afraid to ask for help, prompting Andy to sink further into his delusion and begin pathetically and ironically dancing to Madness's House of Fun while everyone shies away in discomfort. Heck, speaking of idiosyncratic, there's also a prior scene that's so incredibly uncomfortable that I honestly don't like talking about it, where Andy tries to get the kids to help him film a staged fall so he can get on You've Been Framed and receive their selection payout. This show was the UK's equivalent to America's Funniest Home Videos, and I remember there was a time when people genuinely tried to stage things like this to get selected for the easy cash, but Andy's son Joe just keeps hurting himself and asks to stop, while Judith grows increasingly scared, eventually resulting in an aggressive outburst from Andy that, let's just say, felt way too fucking real for me.
You big fucking loser! Selfish little shit! Yeah!
Anyway, the third and final act culminates in Andy blaming everyone but himself for his failures, soon tearing apart the house to expose his family's own secrets as revenge, such as Joe having drugs and filming himself getting oral, while Judith has been secretly photographing her neighbour Claire out of romantic infatuation. This latter detail is actually loosely explored throughout, as Judith expresses the challenges in understanding herself and her sexual orientation, and the profound loneliness she feels in being unable to tell anyone, echoing hints of depression. After Andy hides from the police looking to question him about his altercation with Ray, that night he triggers the fire alarm and stalks the family in the dark, before basically holding them hostage in his twisted attempt at what he claims to be a healthy intervention. Specifically, he lashes out at Sheila for apparently favouring Joe over Judith, which he claims is evident by an ultrascan she keeps in her purse, and by the fact that when the fire alarm went off, she went for Joe first. The scene serves to demonstrate exactly how Dr. Marilyn Gregory described the family annihilator as acting out of vengeance or false altruism, by, again in my non-expert JCS opinion, showing Andy to act like he has the moral high ground over Sheila, when ultimately he is just bitter and jealous that she's the more beloved and responsible parent. Hell, he's a hypocrite himself, because he clearly favours Judith over Joe, whom he's evidently grown to hate. The tragic truth, however, is that Sheila struggled with Judith due to the postnatal depression of having Judith's birth effectively forced upon her by Andy under pressure, since he declared her pregnancy to everyone around them before she could decide if she even wanted to carry the child. It's a profoundly sad detail that reveals the true extent of the strain in their relationship, especially after Sheila reveals she terminated her third pregnancy unbeknownst to Andy due to her fear of his domineering demeanor. The reality is that he's always been like this, as Andy then proceeds to relentlessly antagonize Sheila for murdering their child, when said child was just as much his property, so to speak. The next day, Andy confesses to the camera that he hopes to set his family free of the pain he's caused by overdosing. However, as expected, he soon murders Judith, Joe, and Sheila during one prolonged and gruelingly distressing 15-minute single take that feels like an eternity. His reaction is a mixture of revenge, power, control, and that delusional false altruism. It's cruelly specific. Suffocating Judith is like his peaceful way of showing his love and favoritism for her, while he violently beats Joe to death in anger and hatred before choking out Sheila as if she's ultimately to blame for his actions. The final moments before Andy destroys the camera shows condensation on the lens, as Judith is still faintly breathing, yet her fate remains ambiguous, as the horrific damage has already been done.